Okay, so the first question I've got for you guys is, how long did it take for the film to be produced?
We knew we wanted to find out about poverty through young people. So if you want to just talk about what we were doing in the workshops, Rini, I know you really wanted it.
Well, it started, I just thought it was a little bit of drama. I was like, oh, that. But then, as we carried on, it was more realising what it was about and what we were building on. And it was just, when we made our own story, it was like, this is, because did we go to an event and we heard people's stories and we kind of intertwined that in between the plot and it was great.
So we had lots and lots of stories. We also it's important to say we interviewed another 100 children probably, apart from the ones we were working with. The ones that we were working with shaped the script. So they'd say, I'd give them a script and I was constantly photocopying. They'd say, we wouldn't say that, Anne-Marie, that we wouldn't be like that. And I'd be like, oh right, I'm getting ill on that. So then I would go and change it. So we were doing that constantly. We wanted to make it relevant to them. So that was really important. And then, so then once we had that script, then it was just working with Peter because I didn't know anything about film at all. So he would try and explain to me why this didn't really make sense, but he was, I just have to say, like, an amazing mentor and just helped me through understanding about camera and that was really helpful.
Some movies take years obviously to get going, but in a normal environment of television, it would not take anywhere near that amount of time. But that, I think, is very important to understand. So much went into this, the real stories, and engaging people every step of the way.
How did it feel playing Lucy? Do you feel like you've learned anything you could take away from the role, for either of you? Or both of you?
It was obviously quite a sad experience because I'm not that sort of person, obviously, but it was so interesting to like be a character that's experienced stuff like that, because I think it's important to understand poverty and all of this, and I feel like being able to be a part of it's a big deal for me because it's so near and I had no idea like it was that close down the road to me, and I just think it's important. When we first started, the plot was like, oh yeah, and then things started happening. I was like, would this really happen? And I'm really, people have told me this has happened. I was like, oh, I had no idea. And then as I played it, I thought, well, I've got to kind of tap into that point of view.
What impact would the young people and the team like the film to have in the community?
I want people to know that it isn't just a film, it's what's actually happening. And we've took a theatrical point of view, well, a take on it, but things are happening, and maybe not this particular plot, but
It's really important to say that every single thing in that film has come from real life, and a lot of the people sat here, it's come from their own stories as well, and the stories from the children as well. So that's really important just to say that. And we want it to have an impact. We want it to be used, and we want it to be a tool, as Phil was saying before.
Surely there's a part 2, in brackets. Great story that needs to be seen by more people.
We live in the world of serial drama, so we think episodically that there's a cliffhanger and then there'll be another episode. I think with a film like this, the fact that it leaves some real question marks is actually really important, and that is more important than a part 2. So the question marks are actually in our real lives, they're in our everyday lives, and they're in the streets that we'll drive home through and walk home through and so on. So I don't see a part 2. What I see is part 2 is in the real world, and people take away from something like this. How do you change that? How do there in Lucy's story, there are unexpected consequences, as you have gathered, and poverty is the thing which is driving her life at that time in her life, her personal situation, her family situation. And she's in a position where sofa surfing might seem like actually, that's okay because you've got friends who are helping you out. But the unexpected consequences of living in society when we face those kind of things takes you down the road with Macca and other people, and you become more vulnerable and more exposed to various different things that you don't really want young people to be exposed to. So to me, that's part 2. It's what we take away from it, really.
I think also another way to following on from that really is the fact that Part two is actually the debate which follows. I mean, I think that's the point of it. And actually, it's quite nice actually someone's actually said that, you know, well, what's part two? Because it succeeded as a drama to engage people and start them to ask them what's going to happen to these characters. So I think that's what you should take from it. It's like that the part two is the debate what comes next. And again, Peter's point, you know, there should be a big thing up there saying, are we really going to let this kind of thing keep happening? You know, are we still going to do the same old things to try and to solve or ignore the same problems, or are we just going to try and do different stuff? You know, that's kind of part of the debate I think we need to have.
Actually, everyone in this room can help with part two as well, and that's part of what we hope tonight will be about, is where do you think it can go and how can you help? Because this part two could be 1,000 different versions, so long as it does get to part two. So I do hope anyone in the room who's got any thoughts on that and can actually deliver on them will contact Claire and Anne-Marie.
Can this film be shown anywhere to anyone? Are there any costs or restrictions, etc.? Good job, by the way.
We don't know at all what the future of this film is, and you're right by saying that's part two. So we don't know. We want it to, you know, we want it to be watched, and we want. I think the big thing and the point that I wanted to get across of why we did film was because often you go to the theatre and you can watch stuff about poverty and people want to make social change in theatre, but not many people can afford a theatre ticket in a lot of worlds that I'm used to. We had a chat recently about being able to do stuff with a friend, and that friend might be able to afford to have something to eat, but they can't go to the cinema as well. But often the cinema is something that's accessible for everyone, or telly, and we're trying to get this out there to people, whereas it's out there for everyone. So that's what we hope. We hope to make it accessible for everyone. That's the important thing.
I don't think there are any costs attached to showing the film. Clearances have all been made. You could, I'm sure, be provided with a copy and get on with it.
What can schools do to help?
I've been involved in a lot of schools where they show films like this. They build teaching plans around them. There's specialist teachers who take it forward. That's where it needs to go, and I hope we can make that happen.
Like you said, when you show students videos in assemblies, you can tell they aren't listening, and you can tell they aren't watching. They laugh and they giggle, and they're not actually watching it. But if it's accessible, then yeah, you know, these videos you find on YouTube, like PSAs, like things like that.
I think also just picking up on that, I mean, first of all, it's the easiest way to get this film out is just stick it on these, you know. I mean, social media's got a few problems, we know, but I think, you know, that's one of its perfect uses these days, is to get it out there. And for us, when we started making for me, when I started making programs at Grange Hill, it was only the BBC who would do it, you know. Then Channel 4 came along, and now there's, like, you know, a zillion channels that you can get to, but you still always have to get someone's permission. You know, there's a gatekeeper that stops you, and this might not fit with the schedule, it might not fit with the political climate at the time or whatever, but these days you can just say, here it is, you know, it's there. And in terms of schools, I mean, I've got this word professor in front of me, and the reason I've got that is because I found out years and years ago that Grange Hill was being used illegally, I have to say, being used as a teaching aid in schools to get kids talking, because it was the program that every single kid in the country was watching. And it was still quite difficult, you know, to push things through schools programming and to get the rights and get the clearances and things like that. But I don't think there's anybody making this kind of thing anymore in terms of traditional media. I think the great future is really for you guys to actually be leaders, you know. I think the Policy Truth Commission here is doing a great job. But actually, you know, use your own social media to get the word out, spread it, and just make it available. And actually say this is a free teaching resource, you can have it, you know.
When I wrote on Brookside for 18 years with Phil, and during that time, a lot of the storylines that we ran would have very, very significant impact on people's lives, and people would repeatedly tell us that you put our life on screen, or my life on screen. And some of those stories lasted 3 years and were very tough stories. But they would often then go into other environments, and that may be where people can start to think about next steps with something like this. So for example, literacy stories that we ran on Brookside, they wouldn't just go into schools, but they might go into prisons, for example. The same with domestic violence and child abuse stories, etc. We would find that the stories were being taken and used with the police or within probation service or that kind of thing. So I think the trick with something like this is how do you kind of steer it into places where you think it will have some impact and some benefit. And they might be unexpected places. They might be places that can bring some funding, for example, to some of the projects that are working in environments like this, rather than only thinking of it like who needs to be educated or who needs to be taught something. It's like who can actually bring some resources to help change people's lives as well. So think really left field with it, think laterally, spread the word about it. When the more the social media kind of hit comes off it, it'll start to find its own pathway, and that's a really valuable tool in society.
How was the film funded, and what outcome do you hope to achieve?
Yeah, Claire, do you want to answer?
We knew for PTC2 that we wanted to involve young people, and Anne-Marie had this great idea of how we could develop the voice of young people. So there was some money within our budget. From that, we have also had some financial contribution from the Redmonds, which we're really grateful for. Plus, we've called in lots of favours. People who have done things at great community rates. People have done things for free and voluntary.
What did you guys enjoy the most about being involved?
I loved the whole family involved in it because I've never done anything like this before, and I was just kind of worried that I wasn't going to be good enough, but everyone was just so supporting, and it was just a lovely experience.
I'm kind of in the same place. Like, I've never done anything like this before. I've done things with theatre, but not with film. So it was a really good experience, and like how everything came together, and like the scenes we've seen, they weren't anything like we shot them. Like, where was that shot from? I didn't see that happening. But no, yeah, it was a great experience.
Most say that the best part was the catering. The food was always great.
Wasn't that good?
But that is one aspect that we always enjoyed, is that the camaraderie, the actual friendship, the delivering of a project together. It's great fun, isn't it? You feel you've done something really worthwhile, and I do think this one was particularly worthwhile. So well done.
Well, I have done this sort of thing before, but that's where all this grey hair came from. And what I really enjoyed about it is that I didn't have to worry about it. Somebody else had to do all that, you know.
I used to have hair as well, until I met Anne-Marie a year ago.
I used to, when you read interviews where people say, oh, it's so hard, a job in TV and film, and you think, whatever. Oh my gosh, I've got a new respect for people that do these long days, and just like some of the scenes and how much hard work they were. It's really difficult. But that was it. Just working with people, and how nice everyone was, and how people want to support people, and how they want to help people. But I think just the generosity of, like I was saying, all those people that gave me their stories, like they just, I used to sit in my car and cry sometimes because it was so harrowing, things that they were telling me. But there was so much compassion for other people as well, and that was amazing. And then working on the set, like with little Imogen and Emily and Reen and all of these people that just wanted to make something great, and their work ethic. Like, how old are you, Emily? Like 14. Like, and she just is in every scene bar one, and she just knew her lines, and she was just on point, and she'd never done anything like that before. So yeah, to make something with people that work so hard was just a really lovely experience.
When you're a writer, people just think you sit in some kind of loft with a window looking out over a tree, and that these storylines like float in, and you magically turn them into something with unicorns and giraffes in it and that kind of thing. I've been doing what I do for a very long time, and it's an extraordinary privilege to have real people's stories inform your writing in one way or another. So the word research doesn't even come close to the privilege that's involved in learning from people's real lived experience. So there's people in this room who I don't know their names, I've never met them. I've found through Anne-Marie that their lives have been kind of laid bare in front of us, that they've been through extraordinary and tremendous difficulties and challenges, and that they've been strong enough to share those experiences. And actually, so then as a writer, my job is to be quite tough with that. I can't be sentimental about it. I can't be thinking, oh, we must get all of those things in. You have to use a red pen, you have to use scissors, you have to get rid of things. And you know that you're kind of cutting out people's lives there. But in the end, what you're trying to do is create a kind of, the word we would use is like a composite. It's a bringing together of many stories into a new story, and that new story represents the lived experience and lives of many people. So we hold that incredibly dearly, we hold it with great respect and integrity. We can't do what we do without listening to real people's lives and experiences. And I would just like to thank everybody who contributed to that process along the way, really.
Has taking part in making this film gave you a different outlook on what is going on in people's lives?
Yeah, it's kind of like what I said before. I wasn't really aware, I was quite naive, I didn't really know how much this went on around here. But it's just shown me that it needs to be talked about a lot more, and that it's just much more real than I think anyone really realises. And it just needs to be spoken about.
I think what I'm hoping it will get across to people is how easy it is to fall into poverty. It's not, in this storyline, it wasn't that Gran had a horrendous boyfriend or whatever that forced you out of the house. It was just a series of events, of unfortunate events, and so many people can find themselves with those factors converging and end up in an unbelievably difficult and dreadful situation. It's not about necessarily the horrendous end of life. This can happen to anyone at any time. For health reasons, for one event, it's just very important, I think, that hopefully that film gets that across, and that people come to understand that this isn't something that happens to everyone else. It can happen to anyone. So that's what I'm hoping the message will come across.
I'll come at this a slightly different way, because that particular point is really saying, because one of the things when I saw the original script, what it reminded me of was the Zamo storyline in Grange Hill, which was very groundbreaking at the time. But it was, the point behind it was to show that anybody, given a certain set of circumstances, can slip into addiction. And anybody can end up right down in the depths of despair like Zamo did. And then the second part of that story was to show that actually, even if that happened, there was always a route. There was somewhere you could go for help, And that's one of the things that chimed with me, and why it's quite easy to step forward with Alexis and say we'd support it. But the other thing about taking part in it was the fact that I felt myself, when I looked at the rough cut, I felt myself looking at this and thinking, hang on a minute, this could actually have been in Grange Hill, could have been in Brookie, and it could have been in Hollyoaks, Why? I mean, Grange Hill hit our screens in 1978, and, it ran for 35 years, banging on at the same thing, and these themes, they are happening. Brookie came along to do the same, and we did the same with Hollyoaks, So I almost felt like, hang on, what happened? Why are we still having to tell these stories? But unfortunately, we do. Because these are some of these things, like Lex says, the small things that happen to people's lives, right? They're small in terms of the society, but big in their lives that can change just like that. And why everybody who is homeless, you go and find their story and you find there's some trauma that's happened.
The politics is in every one of us. It doesn't have to be labelled with a party name. It doesn't have to be labelled with a policy. Politics is just about having an opinion and thinking something is right or wrong and getting on with it in life and making things happen. And yeah, Phil's right. You know, we've been around the block a bit and we've seen a lot and we've tried our best. And we do have to hand the baton on at some stage. So if there's any younger voices out there who start wanting to be heard in the world, just start speaking louder.
And Claire and Jackie and particularly Arnold, and I'm sorry I haven't had coffee yet, but we will. Thank you all very, very much for taking the time to be here, and I please do ask you to try and take it that one step further now and see what we can do with the content. Thank you.
We have to praise Cheshire Press for going on right. We have to praise the Poverty and Truth Commission for doing it, and we have to give them their support to carry on doing this. You have to keep making the point all the time, you know. And again, I think that brings us back to the part 2 of the debate. We must keep this debate going. And one of the things I just throw into this is that we have a massive resource in this country. We're, you know, this whole thing about how rich are we, how poor are we, what's austerity and whatever. We've got a massive resource for communication in this country, and it's called the BBC. And this is what they should be still doing, you know, but they walked away from it. And there's a big debate coming on in the next few years about the future of the BBC. Should we be paying for it through subscription? Should we be paying through a license fee? And I think I'm somewhere down the line. I think we should all continue to pay a license fee, but we should insist that the BBC partners, that word partnership, partners with local authorities, partners with bodies like the Poverty and Truth Commission, to get these stories up on screen, to come back to what I said right at the very beginning, to get the media talking about it, to create the environment, to make the policy makers, let's be diplomatic and put it that way, to get the policy makers to pay attention and finally try and sort some of these things out, you know. So to me, taking part with it sort of reignited the flame, you know. Right, but when I get home, I'll be told to calm down, you're too old, you know, you've had your time, give it to the young people to do.